All right, welcome to the White Mountain Endurance Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Heron, and we are also joined today by the recent champion of the Chakura mountain race and local Northeast crusher, Abby Bennett. How you doing this morning, Abby?
Hey Patrick, I'm good. Thanks for having me on. Excited to talk about the race and other exciting things this summer.
Yeah, for sure. So this podcast is new for those tuning in. We just kicked off with our first episode last month, just doing a preview of the upcoming season for White Mountain Endurance and all the races, as well as introducing the new White Mountain Endurance Cup presented by Adidas Terex, which we'll chat a little bit more about later. And then we did a bit of a deep dive into Chakura and did a preview of the race as well as the competitors, one of which was Abby. And so we're excited to now recap the event and talk about her experience out on the course, as well as kind of explore some of her background as a runner. So yeah, I guess we'll just get right into the day and the race. Um, for those, unfamiliar, it's a 14-ish mile course that takes runners uh, up up Mount Chakura and the White Mountains. You sort of go 2/3 of the way up the mountain, then all the way back to the base, and then the full ascent, and then a pretty epic last 4 mile descent off the mountain. There's about 4,800 feet of climbing total over the 14 miles. So definitely some steep stuff, which I know you love, Abby. And yeah, it was a pretty warm day on the course. I think, in the morning it was mid 40s, but it got up to around 80 degrees by midday. So runners certainly dealt with some serious heat, and especially as you get closer to the summit, it's pretty exposed once you're past the tree line. So yeah, were you feeling pretty hot out there, Abby, yourself, or?
Yeah, I was definitely getting warm, especially near the end of the race. And even though we were descending, we had just been like around the summit area, which is pretty exposed to the sunlight, and then yeah, still pushing pretty hard in the last descent. So felt it even in the woods there.
Yeah.
And I knew that a lot of people were still, coming up around the summit. So around that time, like I knew that they were like going through that like peak of heat in the day.
Yeah,
So yeah, props to everyone who finished in those conditions.
for sure. And yeah, one of the cool things about this race is we have sort of an unofficial aid station at the summit, where several of our volunteers hike up. Uh, Lots of water, which is quite the challenge. Maybe even harder for the hikers than for the runners. They're going up 4 miles and couple thousand feet to bring water to the top for runners, and they're out there all day. So yeah, shout out to that crew for helping out. Um, yeah, so the few times I saw you on course, I think 2.5 miles right at the top of the first climb and beginning of the first descent, and then as you were coming out of the woods for the second climb up to the summit, and then a bit on the descent, you were in the lead all three of those times, but it was pretty tight. You and Caitlin were within at least a few seconds on the first climb and maybe 30 seconds or so on that second climb. Yeah, it was a pretty exciting race, especially as a spectator. How did it feel for you battling it out pretty much the entire time?
Yeah, well, I love competitive races and I love being close to people like my competitors. So yeah, I was really excited that there were some ladies there who were really fast, and I was, yeah, especially excited to see Caitlin sign up a few days before, and that really like got me excited to race. And I've competed with Caitlin in skimo like over this past winter. We did a lot of the same skimo races, so I knew she always just absolutely destroys me on the skimo descents. She's obviously an incredible skier, but a great, like, she's a great Nordic skier. She's also a great alpine skier. And so I figured that would translate pretty well to downhill running. And so I was definitely like nervous for the descents competing against her. I knew I could hang on the climbs because we did the schema races together, so on the uphills we would be pretty similar. Um, but yeah, it was awesome to run most of the race with her, and yeah, it's just stayed together for the first probably 10 miles of the race. And then yeah, on the second climb to the summit, or actually the second climb up to that junction before you go around the bad
Yeah.
weather cutoff. Yeah, I was able to break away on the steeper part, and I feel like I do pretty well in the heat, so I think that was kind of an advantage for me. Um, and then I don't know if this is like a real ability or if it's just because I like it a lot, but I feel like I'm stronger on really steep climbs. So I was just kind of scrambling up those ledgy sections and grabbing
Mm-hmm.
on to roots and rocks in the hands. And so I got a little bit of time. And then when you saw me at the top of that climb, I'd like you said, it was probably around 30 seconds. And then yeah, just pushed to the summit and then tried to push as hard as I could on the last descent because I figured she was going to catch up to me. Um, but and I thought she was like I kept hearing like footsteps and I was like, oh no. And so sometimes it would be a guy who would run by me and I was like, okay. But every single time that happened, I was pretty nervous. So I just kept running really hard, like that full descent. And yeah, so I was
Yeah, I mean, you
pretty
built up
beat
a
by the end.
pretty solid lead on that last 4 miles. Because yeah, when I saw you, yeah, about 30 seconds, maybe no more than a minute, and then by the end, you were almost 5 minutes ahead of her at the finish. Um, I think you were two 2:47, right, and then
Yeah,
she was 2:52. So yeah, no, you whatever you did on the descent certainly worked. And yeah, I know she struggled a bit on I think the final few miles, maybe from the heat. So I think she was just trying to get to the finish line, but yeah, that was awesome. And yeah, no, I got to obviously run with you on a good little section, that first sort of slabby section of the descent, which was super fun. And yeah, you were moving pretty well. And I think, yeah, I mean, you were, well, all the top three women were in the top 10 overall for the race, which was awesome. And I think you guys, many of you were moving up throughout the day too, from when I first saw you to that second climb. So that was really cool to see. Yeah.
yeah. I thanks. Yeah, it was great to see you, and I'm sure you got in a ton of miles running, like filming people. And yeah, it was so I kind of felt bad when you were following me. I was like, oh gosh, like I couldn't imagine doing that while holding a phone. And
Yeah, thankfully I
for
stayed upright. I was like, it's
yeah,
a funny thing where when you're filming, you like automatically want to look through the camera, but I realized like, and I still do it even though I've done a fair amount of camera running, but you always look through the camera, but then especially on technical stuff, it's such a bad idea to look through the camera because you're trying to see the ground through the camera, which is just like a
whoa,
nightmare. So I'm like, okay, I just trust that the camera's pointed at you and look at the actual ground with my eyes so I
yeah,
stay upright.
good idea.
But yeah, that was really fun. I'm curious going into the race. Caitlin was, yeah, a late ad, but there was also just a strong overall field. Were you feeling pretty confident going into the race, like training wise and mindset wise, or yeah, where was your kind of mind and body at going into things?
Yeah, I feel like Well, yeah, I feel like training's been going really well, especially over the last 6 months. I feel like I've really started to like tap into I what I think I can do, and hopefully there's still a lot of runway. I'm still a pretty low mileage runner, so I run like usually around 40 miles a week. I got up to almost 50, which was my biggest week before Chocorua. Um, and yeah, it's been a long time trying to build mileage, and I know that some people say that you don't really unlock like your real potential until you start building up to like 60 to 70, but it's also like it varies so much when you're running on trails because of
Totally.
the time on feet. So probably a better measure would be time on feet for the type of training that I do. But I do a mix of trail and road. I try to do a lot of really hilly roads because I think running, just building running efficiency on hills is really important, and making sure that you can keep that running stride in trail races as much as possible, like up as steep as grade as possible. But I definitely felt like I was really hoping to do a performance at Chocorua that showed what I feel like I could do at this point, because my past performances are definitely not indicative of where my fitness is right now. And so
Mm-hmm.
I felt a little bit like I wanted to show everyone that that I've gotten a lot stronger, and I knew that that I was probably being like underestimated a little bit going into it, and I was like, I'm gonna like I felt really motivated to like go in and put in a strong performance, and yeah, I'm super happy about it. I think Caitlin and I came under the, I'll have to check, but the course record on this course I think was set by like Elizabeth McGurk, um,
Yeah.
and I think I think it was
Yeah. I
around
think you guys
250.
were several minutes under. She was 254.
Yeah,
Yeah, and the only other faster times were from the 2019 course. So,
yeah,
the new course record.
yeah, exactly. So I'm happy that we like it was great that we both had a performance under that, because like the two fastest performances were during the same race, which was really cool. It means it was competitive, and we pushed each other, so that was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think so. You were what in 2021, just to fill people in, you were, I think, eighth maybe, and then 2022, fifth, and then you didn't race in 2023, correct?
Uh, yes, that's true. Yeah,
Okay. And so, yeah, so eighth, fifth, and then first. So that's, yeah, pretty awesome progression. Um,
yeah. My time in 2021 was 3:48, so yeah, just
wow,
about an hour.
an hour. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, what would you, I know you talked a bit about just like finding your groove with training. Do you feel like just that consistency that you were able to build up was sort of what made the difference, or more specificity, or yeah, what do you feel like sort of flipped the switch on being able to, I guess, find more confidence and speed out there?
Yeah, I think just consistency. I didn't grow up running, and I didn't run in college. Well, I ran like at my local track club when I was pretty young, like just like 10 years old or something.
Yeah.
Uh, but I didn't really train, and then did some sports in high school, but not seriously, and I never thought I was good at anything. Um, that's probably because I didn't train that hard, and I'm not that naturally talented, I don't think. So I needed to train for many years to actually bring that out of myself, and like
Hmm.
create the adaptations in my body to be able to handle training, and then just yeah, years of consistency changing my uh changing my body like on a cellular level.
Hmm.
So yeah, that stuff takes a really long time, and especially when you start later in life, like you don't have that base to start with. So I had to build that base for years, and what also really helped with that was doing schemo, and just doing uphill laps at resorts for the winter, the last 2 winters, which is now my favorite sport, skimo.
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, and so you can just put in a lot of volume and be at like a higher aerobic effort going uphill without really impacting your body. Um, yeah, in any like in an impact kind of way. You can still get really tired off of doing high volume like that, but then you adapt to it. Um, and then I've been also been doing a lot of biking in between running, so
Okay.
just a lot of like zone 2, zone 3 kind of moderate effort stuff that on the cross training, because I think it's lower impact, and then I can do like harder run efforts. Yeah, and I try to do, as I said, like hilly runs or trail runs and push the uphills as much as I can, to build that aerobic strength and muscular strength.
And your first race of this season was Overland's your first like trail race. So
Yeah,
that was what, like maybe 2 or 3 weeks before this one, I think, or
3 weeks.
yeah,
Yep.
3 weeks. Okay. Yeah, and you were on the podium there, third place. That was pretty awesome. So yeah, pretty sweet start to the season. I guess um well, yeah, I want to get more into what's coming up for you, and but first, just wanted to sort of recap the other top finishers of the race at Chakura, and then we'll move on. But yeah, like we mentioned, Abby was first, and so this is also part of the White Mountain Endurance Cup, which is new this year. So we are putting together 4 sub ultra distance mountain courses, all of which are new except for Chakura. So yeah, the season starts off with Chakura, and then we've got the Jigger Johnson 20 miler in July, which is a new. Jigger Johnson's been around with the 50 miler and the 100 miler, but our 20-mile course is going to be new. And then Baldface Scramble, which is an entirely new race. The 29K is part of the White Mountain Cup. And then Kilkenny Ridge, 25K in September. And so this series is open for anyone to participate. In order for to be considered a finisher of the series, you have to race at least 3 of the 4 events. But we certainly challenge you to run all 4. And the way we're awarding points for for everyone, is it's a percentage of the winning time. And so in this case, Abby is the winner. You got 100 points, but what's cool is every second counts. So the closer you are to that winning time, the more points you'll get. And I think in the case of, let me look at our leaderboard here. Yeah, so Caitlin got 97 points, so only 3 points back. Just goes to show how close a race it was. And on the men's side, it was only 1 point difference. So, yeah, I think the point, doing the percentage of the winning time makes it pretty sort of high stakes, which is fun.
Yeah, I love that, and I didn't realize that was the case when I was running Chocorua, and I was like, darn, I didn't have to push as hard as I did like on that descent, but now that I know that, I'm glad that I did.
Yeah, exactly. For both, if you're leading the race, there's always more room to push to get, a little bit more of a point difference. And then same thing with second, third, etc. Give it your all to the finish line. So yeah, we'll go through just the top 10 on the women's side, and then we'll share the men. But obviously Abby, and then Caitlin Patterson was a close second, and Lindsay Weigel, who's part of our Northeast Aravaipa racing team, also broke 3 hours on the course, and I think one of the maybe top 5 times on our new course. And then Caitlin Mac Guthrie in fourth, Catherine Denny in fifth, Catherine Lavolsi in sixth, Elizabeth Fay in seventh, Grayson Newman in eighth, Kaylin Ramsey in ninth, Bridget Smith Franey in 10th. And yeah, we're hoping to see many of these folks return for Jigger Johnson or for one of the other three races in the series. And I'm sure there will be some new contenders. I know Joanna Fortier wasn't able to make this race, but is planning on doing the other three. So yeah, still time to sign up and get your name in the running for the cup. On the men's side, just will yeah, that was also a super close race. And there was a fair amount of movement on the men's side, which yeah, made for a pretty dynamic race. So when I first saw the top guys come through at 2.5 miles, Jesse Young was in the lead and had a pretty solid lead. And he was followed second place by Mark Young, and then there was a pretty big gap between everyone else. But Mike Conley, who has done a bunch of these races before, he was in third. And by I think Jesse Young and Eric Brooks were 1-2 within seconds of each other at mile, I guess 9 before that final push to the summit. And I think Jesse was struggling a bit, maybe from the heat, maybe from the uphill. So Eric kind of made his move there at the summit. And then Mike Conley was not too far back and still holding a solid third place. And for anyone who knows Mike, he's really good on the descent. So yeah, I had a feeling he was gonna make his move, and I was like, go get him, Mike.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so
he's
coming off
incredible.
the summit, Eric Brooks had taken the lead. I think he was first to the summit, so he'd passed Jesse Young. And then, yeah, Mike was, and there's a really cool drone shot of him up on the summit, which will probably be coming out in the recap video. But yeah, he really just made his move on that 4 mile descent. And so, yeah, Mike came away with the win, although it
Patrick,
was super close. Oh,
do you
yeah.
know where he passed Eric? Eric was second place, right?
On the
Do you know?
descent,
Yeah.
I don't know for sure. They were within probably a minute at when they started the descent. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
and
not entirely sure where he made his move. I think it was fairly early on.
okay.
I imagine because that first section before you get back to the juncture with Liberty, like, is the more technical sort of section. And my guess is he on that technical stuff was probably able to take the lead, and then because that last 2.5 miles is fairly runnable, I would say, like the descent. Um, so they're
Yeah.
probably more even there. But yeah, I would
Yeah,
have
that
liked to
would be
have
exciting.
seen that.
Yeah. That would have been really cool to see, like, because they finished, if they were that close at the top and then they finished pretty close to each other, it might have been, yeah, I'm sure that was really exciting.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think it was as close as last year's finish, which was also pretty epic on the men's
Oh, yeah,
side, just like two
yeah, yeah,
seconds, and that was literally in the finish line shoot essentially.
yeah,
But yeah,
that's
so
crazy.
Mike Conley came away with the win, 100 points for him. Eric Brooks close second with 99 points. Um, Travis, I think this is the let me look. Travis was fourth, so this is do 1 second. I think they finished within a couple seconds of each other. Yeah, so Nigel Bates from Vermont was our third place finisher. Uh, and oh yeah, times. Mike Conley ran 2:31, which yeah, definitely one of the faster times on the new course. Not as quick as last year was, I think, 2:21. The top two guys ran, um, but it was, well, yeah. Mike was saying the weather last year, I think, was more favorable for his sort of his liking, just the cooler
Yeah.
weather. And I think it was a little bit wet, but not too wet that it sort of slowed things down too much. So yeah, I think, the times could have been maybe a little bit slower because of the heat. But yeah, 2:31 for Mike, Eric Brooks in 2:32, and then Nigel Bates in 2:43. Travis Lavin, which I thought he had a really great race coming from Nevada. This was his first race on, I think, in the East Coast, or at least in the Northeast. And yeah, so pretty impressive that he was able to sort of hold his own out there on the terrain. And I think he's doing Broken Arrow in, I guess, a week, which I know you are, Abby, but we'll get into that. But yeah, and then Peter Bonito was in fifth. Um, Jesse Young, who was our early race leader, in sixth. Um, and
They
let's
were
see.
I was with them when I got to the summit, I think, and then
Okay,
or I was slightly ahead and then they caught me or something. Something like that.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah, because I think you were, yeah, right around them. And then Monty Krumer, Matt Ridley, Owen Glover, and Andrew Gallant. Um, 5, 6, 10. Yeah, so that was our top 10 on the men's side. Um, and yeah, next up is Jigger Johnson, 20 miler, on, I think, July 18th, that weekend. So
I think
Abby,
so.
will you be at Jigger Johnson, or you're gonna be
I
there?
will.
Sweet, awesome.
Yep.
All right, yeah, that'll be fun because it will be a new course for everyone.
It looks
And
so fun. I'm so
yeah,
excited that it goes that counter. I think it goes counterclockwise, which like you go up over the really steep climbs first, and then you kind of have gradual descents, and that looks really fun.
yeah. Yeah, it'll be a good time for sure. Awesome. Well, that sort of is our recap, I guess, of the race and of the White Mountain Endurance Cup. Um, I'm just curious, like, when you first heard about the cup, um, it being committed already to the cup. I imagine you're excited for it, but yeah, curious to hear your thoughts on, yeah, what this new addition to sort of the Northeast racing scene is.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting and it gives people like a schedule that they can focus on for the summer and kind of maybe make their primary thing. I like how spaced out they are because
Yeah,
they're pretty aggressive races, and for me, it's going to be my like most racing I've done in a season, most miles and vert. So I really appreciate how well spaced out they are because yeah, it's like it takes me a long time to recover from even Chocorua, just pretty hard on the body. Um, and yeah, I'm really excited. I think it's a fantastic addition to the Northeast racing scene, and I love that you guys are yeah just being yeah making the racing really you're marketing it well, you're making it exciting and adding some competition. Um, yeah, just doing more media around it. I think it's awesome.
yeah, I think the media side is definitely, there's like a lot of, I don't know, excitement and sort of room to grow there. Just in the last few years, there's been such a great push for, live streams and media coverage of races. Golden Trail Series definitely helping lead the charge with that. And
Yeah.
yeah, having, also been sort of in the Northeast running scene for the last several years, I definitely am excited to see more coverage of the athletes. Often, we have such a competitive and deep scene here, on both the racing side and on the FKT side, but often from a more national media perspective, it can be overlooked. And already I think there's, a lot more eyes on what's happening here, which is really cool.
Yeah, and
So
that's largely
yeah.
thanks to you. Yeah, I mean you killed it with the videos, like the
Thanks.
live updates during the race, and that's huge, I think. Yeah, like so many people told me that they kept checking your page, and seeing those live updates with just really well done video, like following the athletes. Yeah, just great scenery. It's awesome. I think it attracted some eyes from like across the country, and probably people who didn't know what Northeast you like racing looks like got to see it, like especially through that descent with some of the descent videos you got, like they're able to see just how technical and awesome it is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely, when I was like picking spots to film, I was like, oh, we got to get this descent, because yeah, and that's not like that's like the one exception of the course. That's what a lot of the course is, but I do think it does that specific
Yeah,
section was a great example of sort of the style of running out here.
for
And
sure.
also, yeah, just how crazy it is to run it at the speeds that you guys do. So that was super cool, and I definitely think it's a little tricky with cell coverage and things like that to pull off, more full on live streams, but that's definitely something that we would like to do more of. Um, and yeah, maybe that'll be in the future for sure. We were able to do it with Race the Cog last year, although yeah, it's a much more contained course.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we'll hopefully see more of that in the future. Yeah, and speaking of Race the Cog, is next weekend. You've been there a couple times before, but this year you're missing it, which is sad. But you'll be out west.
Yeah, yeah, I'm doing the Broken Arrow vertical kilometer. I didn't plan it ahead with enough time to sign up for like the 23K or the 46K, which
Okay.
I wanted to do, but I wasn't even thinking about racing anywhere other than the Northeast until like the day after Chocorua, and then I was like, why not?
Oh
Why
wow,
not do
that's
this?
awesome. So you signed
Yes,
up like the right after then. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Very
I feel
cool.
like I have trouble trusting my body like 6 months out. I'm like, I don't know
Yep.
if I'm gonna be like healthy to race, so I usually don't sign up for stuff until pretty close to it. Um, so yeah, and I just felt good, and it's not like I don't think it's the best suited race for me, but I don't really care at this point. I think it's just more about getting the experience to go out there and do a
Totally.
bigger race with like and just line up at the same race as some of the best people in the country, and see how my body does at altitude. And yeah, it's just going to be really fun. I'm excited to, and then also like I think I would rather cheer for some of the longer races and just get a
Yeah.
taste of what it's like to race out there. But yeah, I'll be around the other races all weekend, which are really competitive and exciting. So I'll just be running around all weekend.
Yeah. No, I think that's a wise way to approach it. I mean, I think sort of dipping your toes in is, yeah, smart, and that way, you'll learn a lot when you're out there for sure. And
Have
take
you
home a
been
lot
out
of.
there?
I haven't been there to that race, but I have been, yeah, in the area. Um,
Cool.
and yeah, the few times that I have raced either on the West Coast, or I've actually done more racing in Europe than the West Coast, which is kind of funny. But um, yeah, I mean, you learn so much and you take home so many lessons to training and things like that. Things that, no matter how many, I don't know, podcasts or other things you listen to, you don't actually, get the lesson until you like experience it yourself in the race.
For sure.
So I
Yeah.
think, yeah, yeah, I'll be curious to sort of hear what your takeaways are from it afterwards. And
Yeah.
definitely spectating, I think, is a great way to sort of build up, like, for me at least, build up excitement and sort of inspiration and motivation to, go back in a future year. Sometimes that's a nice way, because oftentimes you know, you I mean, you can definitely get excited from watching media coverage and live streams and things like that, but seeing it in person is a whole nother level of inspiration. And so I think it can be like a really motivating thing. And I'm sure it'll sort of fire you up for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I've watched the live stream for the last 2 years of Broken Arrow. Yeah, but I feel like it doesn't fully capture what the vibe is, and yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Yeah, also that's great that that you've done more European races. I feel like from coming from the Northeast, European races are probably more suited for us. Um, were some of the races you did like technical, or like what races did you do?
Yeah, fairly technical. So I was mainly doing like ultra stuff. And yeah, and so not a lot of shorter stuff, but definitely technical. I would say, yeah, probably more similar than the West Coast, although just the duration like of the climbs and the descents is hard to
Yeah,
sort of mimic around here. I love the sort of constant ebb and flow rolling nature of like northeast trails where you're climbing, you're ascending, you're climbing, you're ascending. In Europe, there's a bit more of you're climbing for an hour, you're descending for an hour, like just these
brutal.
really long, where it definitely just affects your body differently.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, and even you know, trying to mimic that around here is tricky. Um, but
yeah.
yeah, but it actually leads me to I guess the Mount Washington Roadway race, which is probably one of the longest distance wise, continuous climbs around here. And I know
Good point.
it's Friday, June 14th right now. You are racing the Mount Washington Road Race tomorrow morning. Um, this will be your first time, I guess, not racing up Mount Washington, but at least on the road. I know you've
Yeah.
done Race the Cog, and I think you hold at least one or two FKTs on the trail side of things, right?
Yeah, I have the winter up and down.
Okay.
But that was back in like 2020 or something.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
not the same person I am now,
for
so I'm not
sure.
like proud of that.
Well, you should
So
be. No, you totally should be. I mean, we're
it's a
all
stepping
evolving
stone.
along the way, so it's a good stepping
Exactly, yeah.
stone.
Yeah, exactly. Like we should yeah, I'm really happy that I pushed myself even then when, I didn't really have any like reason to do that. Because that was totally like all of those pushes that I did a few years ago were necessary to like advance me to where I am now. So yes, I appreciate them. But yeah, I do this summer. I do want to go for the summit ascent or the Mount Washington ascent via the Tuckerman Ravine Trail, which
Nice.
is just a good time trial route that a lot of people like to do just to compare against previous selves.
Yeah.
Yeah, against other people. Again, yeah, just it's a really fun one. But yeah, I this is my first time doing the road race, and I feel like it's probably more painful than the time trial up Tuckerman Ravine Trail because
Yeah.
there's no way to hide. Like you just have to keep running the whole time, and just yeah, there's nothing to distract you. Like no fun scrambling or different steps. It's just the same steps for 7 miles, 7.4 miles. Uh, yeah, it's gonna be tough.
What inspired you to sign up and add it to your calendar?
Uh, I I think it's just an iconic race, and
Yeah.
I wanted to. I photographed it with Joe VJ last year, and after seeing it happen, I was like, I want to do this. This looks really fun but painful. And it's just iconic, as I said. And
Yeah.
I also like that it's competitive. Like it brings in athletes from around the country, and um, I think it's probably one of the more competitive like mountain races around here. It's kind of a
Absolutely.
road
Yeah.
race, but yeah.
Last year was it last year or the year before that it was halfway sort of up the?
The year before.
Okay, 2022. Okay.
Hmm. Yeah, but the
Um,
weather looks really awesome for tomorrow.
oh, nice, awesome, sweet. Well, yeah, that'll be fun to see how you fare out there. I know it's definitely a, I mean, it's a huge physical challenge, but definitely the mental challenge is, I think, the
Yeah,
part that a lot of people, that's the, the most room for improvement usually is the mental side of things,
for
because
sure.
like you said, it is such a just continuous grind and nowhere to hide, and you can generally run most of it, but it's like, yeah, it's hard to just stay engaged, and
Hmm.
I think just for me, sort of narrowing your focus just into the next step is the way to go, because otherwise if you start looking too far up then it gets a
Yeah,
little intimidating, or yeah, just really focus just sort of what's right in front of you, and slowly it'll happen.
yeah. Do you feel like, I guess I'm trying to think about this like a speed workout. Like I do a lot of uphill speed workout
Hmm.
interval type things, and I feel like the first one or two are kind of hard because you're too like conscious, you're too in it, and you're like thinking
Yeah.
about it too much. And then after a few reps, you start getting like your brain just kind of turns off, and you just kind of get numb to it.
Yep.
Do you feel like in the race, like from your experience, do you think it helps to just like kind of turn your brain off and not think too much during it?
Yeah, a little bit, I think. I mean, sort of checking. Yeah, I think not thinking too much about sort of your physical experience or your emotional experience, and just sort of
Mm-hmm.
dialing in. But yeah, I think like the important thing is like making sure you're engaged, because I think the style of racing, it can be an easier format to sort of check out too much,
Mm-hmm.
and not sort of keep the pedal to the metal, and especially that first mile. Well, you go out of the gates pretty hot because it's actually like downhill, and then flat, and then you hit the climb right away. And I feel like the first 2 miles you're sort of in it. There's the excitement, and then that middle section is like I think the hardest part,
Mm.
because once you get above the tree line and you're starting to get closer to the top, and you're feeling the finish line like coming on, I feel like the last 2 miles, even though that's some of the steepest sections, I feel like it's easier to push there because the finish is coming. But
Yeah.
I think that middle third section is the tricky one. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll be great. You're a strong climber, and yeah, seem like you put in the work, so I'm sure it'll
Thanks.
pay
Yeah.
off.
Yeah. It always hurts no matter how much work, because then you just go harder, and like
Yeah.
it lets you go harder, and then that almost hurts more, but it's okay. Like you said, it is really mental, and that's something that I just keep realizing more and more like every year is just like the mental, like the pain that you don't think you can hold, you actually can for hours, and you can hold it for longer, and it's just getting comfortable in that like discomfort.
Hmm. Love it. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, tomorrow we got Mount Washington Road Race. Following week you got Broken Arrow VK. You mentioned potentially going after one of the FKTs on Mount Washington. Are there other, and then White Mountain Endurance Cup? Are there other races or FKTs on your radar for this summer or fall? Yeah, what's the rest of your season look like?
Yeah, I'm also hoping to do Loon Mountain Race, which is July
Okay.
7th. So the next three are just uphill, shorter races. Yeah, hopefully, I think, I think it'll be okay because they're uphill. So, but we'll see how the recovery goes from the next two. And then I want to do Xterra uh, Trail Champs again, the half
Nice.
marathon. Yeah, and then yeah, I don't have anything else planned. I want to just do some bigger adventures and hopefully push my training further than I have before and do more miles and just get really like get really strong and get in as much adventuring as I can in the whites this summer.
Awesome.
Probably go for another, like just try to do another Prezi as fast as I can, because that's always fun. Yeah.
Nice. That sounds like a solid season. Yeah, I'd love to like maybe sort of switch gears and just talk about, beyond just like racing and yeah, like sort of well, maybe go a bit into like some of your background. You were saying you found running a little later in life, but I'd love for people just to get the chance to like know you more as a person outside of just racing, and sort of yeah, where I don't know, just what else goes on in the world of Abby. But yeah, so I guess maybe we'll start on the running side of things. But I think I heard I was listening to the Run the Whites podcast with Andrew, and you were saying you sort of got reintroduced to running when you were in the Boston area and running in the Fells, which yeah, it was awesome to hear because I love the Fells, and that's also
Yeah.
where I did a lot of trail running when I was also sort of starting that journey. And I mean, the Fells has some good stuff in there. If you can handle the Skyline Trail, I feel like
Yeah.
it's good prep for the Whites. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I guess like what were you up to in Boston then, and like how did running come into your life or come back into your life?
Yeah. So I was very like inactive during college. I did a lot of I did a lot of things that didn't involve sports. So like just a lot of like focused on being really focused on school and did a lot of like extracurricular clubs and stuff like that. So I didn't prioritize sports at all. I was not interested in it. And then I wanted to like just create this career in finance and go as far as I could. And that's what I thought I wanted. So I started working in Boston at an investment consulting firm right after college and just like really did not enjoy it and realized that I didn't want to continue down that path.
Hmm.
And so I gave that a year um, before I left. But during that year, I just started watching some of like Billy Yang's YouTube videos and just discovered trail running and Courtney Dauwalter, obviously. And I was just super inspired by her um, and by the sport, and I just really wanted to be out of the city and in the woods running around. Um, so it was really appealing to me, and so I like went to the REI and bought like a hydration pack and just started like running around the fells. And I didn't
Awesome.
do a whole lot of that because it was kind of near the end of my year in Boston, but
Hmm.
um, just really loved it and just became obsessed almost immediately. And I was like, I want to do this really like as much as I can and take this as far as I can. And obviously, I was really motivated by the people who are doing amazing things like Courtney and just like crushing it out there. And I was like, I want to compete with these people someday, and like I think I can do it. It's, even though I
Yeah.
had no evidence of being able to. Um, and so yeah, I moved back home to my home state of Maine after that year and was trying to run more, but just kept getting injured because my tendons had just been sedentary for like 8 years.
Yeah.
and and I also didn't realize that you can prevent tendonitis by doing strength training. And if you feel a little injury coming up, it's not like you're doomed and it's going to turn into tendonitis. But I didn't realize that you could just kind of heal it by doing light strength, like taking a few days off, doing light strength, progressing exercises. So yeah, wasted a lot of time before realizing those facts. Uh, and yeah, uh, yeah, Kelton and Ashton at Steady State Health like helped me realize how to just prevent injuries from happening. And so now I'm finally able to train constantly. But
Very cool.
yeah, so that was a big learning curve. And then I just, I immediately started like running in the White Mountains, which is really hard on your body compared to a lot of other trails that people have access to
Yeah.
when they start running. Um, and it's not really running; it's just kind of like like falling and crawling and all that stuff. So, uh, yeah, that's those some of the challenges that we face here in the Northeast. But yeah,
And
then
are you're living in New Hampshire now, or you're in Maine, or
yeah, my partner and I live in Bartlett, New Hampshire,
okay.
so right at the start of Crawford Notch. Um,
Wow, that's a good spot.
yeah, it's great. It's an awesome spot, but it is difficult because I just graduated with my master's in conservation, and right before, so I graduated in the fall of last year, and then I worked as a winter hut caretaker at Greynob, the Randolph Mountain Club hut on Mount Adams over the winter. And I was like, okay, now I can get a real job after doing that experience. But
Yeah.
it turns out that there's not very many jobs up in the Mount Washington Valley. So struggling a little bit, like trying to find something to do in the conservation space, hopefully. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge being a a young person trying to live and work here. The yeah, it's really expensive to live here. There's
Hmm.
hardly any housing, and there's not too many jobs, so trying to make it work, but it is definitely hard.
Yeah, no, I hear that for sure. I yeah, one I think it's really cool that and I in my research on you I saw that about your masters in ecology and conservation science, I think.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear how that sort of intersects with your like running and um yeah, just like what yeah, I guess just how those are connected for you.
Yeah, I guess the reason that I like to trail run is because I like being outside, and I love just hanging out in natural places, especially here in the Northeast, because I grew up in Maine and my family would spend a lot of time in the summer doing canoe trips or taking trips up to the Allagash or just hiking around Western Maine. And so it's just part of what I love, and it's just like a really big part of my life. And I think I wanted to I wanted to do work that related to what I care about, and so I went back to grad school for that program and uh, learned a lot about how conservation impacts communities and how it financially impacts communities. I think we talk a lot about how conservation can be an attractor to economic driver for communities,
Hmm.
and especially recreation based conservation. Um, and that's true, and it's all really hard to measure because you don't know exactly why people are there. Like, are they in the area because of the conservation, or are they is it part of the reason? I mean, it's really hard to measure that economically. And then there's another argument that conservation takes away from the economics of a town because conservation is tax exempt usually. So
Hmm.
the project I was doing in grad school was researching like these local economic impacts of conservation and thinking about how they might impact like the the economics of a town, the tax rates of a town, how expensive it is to live in that area, um, yeah,
Were you
stuff
able
like
to
that.
find any sort of evidence leaning one way or the other in general, or?
Um, yeah, so I did this really complicated modeling, like with a huge data set that I got and like collected and combined and uh, controlled for like as many confounding variables as I could. But uh, that type of analysis is always like you take it with a grain of salt,
Yeah.
especially when a lot of these things are really hard to quantify. But yeah, we found that like there wasn't really on average, and I was just looking at Maine. There wasn't
Okay.
really an impact of conservation on the mill rate directly, the property tax rate in the town.
Yeah.
So this is really this is really like granular, but
No, it's
um,
fun.
yeah, it's some people like it's really important to them, and people who work in municipal governments, and then people who work at land trusts, they have these conversations all the time because every time that like a land trust proposes a conservation project, the town asks them like, well, are you going to pay taxes on it? Like, how is this going to affect our budget? Because
Yeah.
yeah, the tax revenue gets taken off the town budget. So yeah, for land trusts and other conservation groups in towns, it's a really big conversation, and there's a lot of strong opinions about it. Um, but yeah, we were able to find that like some types of conservation had a bigger impact on tax rates. Um, so like municipal conservation, ironically, had the biggest impact because towns can't pay taxes to themselves. But federal conservation, on the other hand, like Acadia, um, not saying Acadia specifically, but federal conservation has less of an impact on tax
Okay.
revenues because the federal government has a really strong payment in lieu of taxes program, so they still pay the towns for the lost tax revenue.
Hmm.
So yeah,
All right. Very cool. Yeah. I mean, like you said, I feel like there's probably, it seems like outwardly like maybe fairly intangible. So it's pretty cool that you're able to like put some actual numbers maybe to things. And, I think even if there is maybe not, well, yeah, just like more conservation often will lead to more outdoor recreation. And like outdoor recreation is a huge economic driver, especially here
mm-hmm.
in the Northeast. And, I think in Maine, like per capita, I think it's one of like the like strongest in the country for outdoor recreation. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think the more we do in that regard is, I mean, yeah, so many benefits to besides just the economics to outdoor recreation as we experience firsthand. But
for
that
sure.
sounds like really exciting work.
Yeah, it was a really fun project. I'll just add too that yeah, some land trusts have the perspective that like more conservation is better, conserve as much land at all costs, and I understand that like from like a personal values perspective, like we want to protect our natural places. I really understand that, but I think land trusts are generally moving towards a more holistic approach where they want to do conservation for the benefit of the community and make sure they're
Hmm.
not unfairly, causing economic impacts to especially to people who are struggling in the community.
Yeah.
And so they have this bigger conversation about how conservation fits into the like the whole town and the whole community and want to make sure it benefits everyone. So I think that's a better way to do it. And
Yeah.
then you start to see like more well planned out like parcels. Um, yeah, either for providing recreation opportunities to people who might not have it, or continuing wildlife corridors, and just making sure it's really well thought out. I think it's more effective.
Would you like could you see yourself like working for a land trust, or what sort of work would you, in an ideal world, like to try out?
Yeah, I would love to work for a land trust or a conservation group up here in the White Mountains area. That would be kind of the goal because I love living up here. Um, yeah, it's my favorite place in the world, so I'd love to keep living here. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. No, I appreciate, or I guess, yeah, I can appreciate your sort of commitment to trying to pursue like your passions and what excites you. And I think that is, yeah, really important. And yeah, so I commend you for that.
Thank you.
But curious to, yeah, hear more about also your time as a hut caretaker. Um, sounds like a kind of I mean, a super unique, fun job, but also kind of a daunting one at the same time. Yeah, what drew you to that, and then what did you learn from that? I mean, I'm sure there was some challenges in that experience.
Yeah, I wanted to do the job just because it's such a unique opportunity to get to live on uh, this the shoulder of the second tallest mountain in the Northeast, Mount Adams, and yeah, just getting to live in the woods, like at the mercy of the elements, and having to become comfortable with the weather and the trail conditions, and being familiar with it at a deeper level than I ever had been, and very few people get to. I was just really intrigued by that, and I
Hmm.
wanted to do that, and I was like, well, yeah, I probably won't have another opportunity to do this in my life, so I'm going to take it. And yeah, it was for sure challenging. I spent a lot of the time, was probably the majority of the time, was alone. And
Hmm.
sometimes I would go like 5 to 6 days without seeing people.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so it was definitely remote, uh, and also not the best for training because the trail conditions and weather conditions are so
Yeah.
just variable up there. So I would try to get up to Mount Adams as much as I could at least, but because it's just below tree line, sometimes you pop up like 30 feet and the wind is just horrific, and you're like,
Yeah.
nope, not today. So yeah, but I also did like become a lot more comfortable in winter conditions up there, just learning what is okay, and then kind of like, yeah, learning the margins of what is okay versus what is not, and like how long I
Hmm.
can tolerate this for. And um yeah, so just learned a lot about the weather up there, and then it was cool to get to report the weather daily to the
Okay.
Mount Washington Avalanche Center and NOAA.
Okay. Did you have like a bunch of daily, like I guess in addition to reporting the weather, a bunch of daily tasks that sort of kept you busy during the day, or was it more just hanging out and yeah,
Yeah,
what was a day in the life like?
it was a lot of hanging out and reading. Um,
Okay.
yeah, and I would keep the hut like fairly clean, but when there was no people there, I didn't have a lot to do. More
Yeah.
when there were people there, and then I would do daily rounds over to the other shelters. So like Crag
Okay.
Camp, which
Yeah.
is probably the most. If you haven't been to Crag Camp, you have to go. Like I'm sure you've been there a lot. So, but it's like the most epic hut I think in the White Mountains. Um, it's just like right on the edge of King Ravine.
Hmm.
Just all windows, so you can see the whole ravine in Madison and Adams. Epic.
Very cool. Well, yeah, that I when I like right out of high school, I wanted to so badly be like a hut caretaker, like for not probably not the winter, probably the summer season would be my first draw. But I think that's really cool that you did in the winter, and yeah, just like being such a part of sort of nature there, like that, just immersed in it must have been um yeah, just pretty. I mean, well, yeah, I definitely saw a lot of your photos that you were posting throughout, and just like the sheer beauty of it was pretty stunning.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
amazing. I felt like a little forest gnome up there, like living in the this little cabin, and yeah, it's just uh like lighting my fire for warmth every day.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I guess we'll wrap things up maybe shortly. Oh, I'm curious. You said you did a lot of reading. Do you have any favorite books that you read in your time there, or yeah, what were some of the stuff you were reading?
Yeah, so Mountain Voices is probably one of my favorite books
Okay.
ever, and it's written by Doug Mayer and um Oreskes. I can't remember her first name. But they so yeah, I think she
Doug
looks to
of
be the
Run the Alps, right?
Yeah,
Is
yeah, Doug
yeah,
Mayer
yeah.
now he lives in Chamonix. He run the Alps. Yeah, he was a hut caretaker at Grenoble back in the day, and he's done a lot around the area. And
Okay.
he, yeah, you know, I'm sure you know him. He's written books about UTMB.
Yeah, I
Uh,
feel like I know a lot of his like Europe stuff, but maybe less of his. I know he grew up around in the Northeast, but I feel like I know less of that side of him. But that must have been cool to like be the caretaker, like generations later kind of
yeah,
thing.
it's so cool. Yeah, you get to a lot of the books that are up in the Grenoble Library are written by either guests or previous caretakers or about previous caretakers. So it's like cool to learn about the history of the place. Yeah, so that's a fantastic book that really it's like interviews with different iconic people in the White Mountains, and
Okay.
so you get if you read all of them, you really piece together like a history of and culture of the White Mountains area, and there's so many like fun facts in there about like Tuckman Ravine back in the day and like how the Avalanche Center used to operate, and yeah, it's really cool.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I'm gonna write it down right now. Mountain Voices. I haven't. I
Yeah,
have some of his other books, but
yeah, sweet.
Mountain Voices. Very cool. Well, yeah, thanks so much, Abby, for taking the time to share more about yourself and recap the race with me. And yeah, best of luck at Mount Washington and then Broken Arrow. I'll certainly be tuned into the live stream in between time on. I'll be on Mount Washington for Race the Cog helping out, but hopefully the timing works with. I guess the VK is on Friday, so I
Yeah,
can definitely. I'll be around to tune in for that. But yeah, best of luck and. Yeah, I guess I'll see you at the probably Jigger Johnson
yeah.
next. Awesome. Any closing words, Abby, or anything else you wanted to share?
I don't think so. Thank you for asking so many great questions, and yeah, I didn't expect to talk about my thesis, but I loved it. So yeah,
I
thank
think
you,
that's no,
and
I think that's super unique, and I like how it sort of yeah is like so interconnected with your own running experience, and I'm sure that's like a I don't know a energy source for you when you're out
for
there
sure.
running. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Well, yeah, thank you, and also, yeah, wanted to shout you out for everything you're doing for the Northeast region and running out here, racing. You're doing so many things. You're all over the place, and just yeah, you kill it on the media side. So yeah, thank you for doing all that you're doing.
absolutely. Yeah, no, I love it. So, all right. Well, I'm
Cool,
sure we'll have you on as a future guest. But until then, yeah, thank you, Abby. And yeah, closing out this episode of White Mountain Endurance.
cool.